Civilization 7 is by far the most controversial game in the series, even more so than Beyond Earth, which moved away from the normal formula. Hello there, Golf Freak here, and this video is both a review and an attempt to explain why Civ appears to be crumbling under its past success. Full disclaimer, I have the Founders Edition, which I fully paid for. I have not contacted Firaxis in any way, shape, or form, nor do I get monetization, so I have zero economic benefit. That being said, this will still be biased as I have an opinion on the game itself, and I will be adding speculation. After playing the game, reading reviews, and lurking on the Civilization Discord, I believe I've identified several key problems people have with the game. The first is price. The base game of Civilization 7 is $70, while the Founders Edition is $130. These prices don't sit well with many people for a couple of reasons. The game is, air quotes, incomplete, and day one DLC. In terms of the game being incomplete or missing features, many have cited that there is no Scout Auto Explore. The Civilopedia is more of an encyclopedia and is not helpful. There is no more one more turn. There is no score victory, nor a way to turn other victories off, or UI, and bugs. I believe that many fall into the trap of thinking that the game is incomplete and missing features just because it was in a previous game. In the case of a Scout, auto-exploring can't be missing unless it was promised before the game was released. The Scout's special abilities now make it almost impossible to automate and require manual control. However, the fact that one more turn wasn't available upon release is just tragic. I understand while it currently isn't in the game, because they fully intended for each age to be a start and stopping point, which hasn't been implemented, and they will add it then. But it basically cements that this is more of an early access than a full normal game release. There isn't anything inherently wrong with that. It allows for feedback, which they are known to listen to, but people will be much less forgiving because it wasn't correctly stated, nor what we expect in the 7th entry for a game. The earlier release could be 2K trying to up their sales for the quarter, or Firaxis promising a release date they couldn't meet due to the comparative complexity of the game and making it available on every known system. The latter is also probably the reason for the bugs, state of the UI, the Civilopedia being more of an encyclopedia instead of a game guide, etc. The result negatively affected the PC release, which is most likely their primary audience. In terms of day one DLC, many people believe that because it is available at or near the release of a game, it should be included. I disagree with this because of the way games are funded. Firstly, the game is complete as just the base version. You do not need the DLC to get the full experience. This DLC is effectively no different than the Leader Pass in Civilization 6. Most likely, seeing that the Leader Pass is 2K's horse armor, they added additional budget specifically to create similar DLC. Most likely, the Leader Pass was funding Civ 7, and this is funding the expansions. Some people say excessive DLC only exists because people buy them. While this is true, the counter argument is that there are also people who only buy the game on sale, even if it's the best game ever. The real question is the price actually worth it? If you like everything you've seen with all the media currently covering the game and you can afford it, by all means get it. Otherwise, wait until the game is on sale or pay previous Civs. I also don't find the price to be exorbitant either when compared to previous Civ games. A large chunk of the current player base are people who obtain Civilization game through sales. As a result, for a cheaper price, they got a more polished and complete game with expansions for less. This can dramatically skew the value for money perception. I'm curious how many people realize the full game of Civ 5 is currently $140 and $230 for Civ 6. In that regard, Civ 7 is not much different, especially when you take into account inflation. Besides these reasons, it is also possible that gameplay changes are what drove the extremely negative reviews. So now we'll go over them utilizing the 4X's after addressing the elephant in the room, which is the age system and leaders. Unlike previous iterations, Civilization breaks the gameplay into 3 ages: Antiquity, Exploration, and Modern. For each of these ages, you will pick a civilization that existed during that time period. In Antiquity, you can freely pick the civilization, but going forward it is limited by the civ you initially picked, certain objectives you complete during gameplay, or leader you choose. The leader you choose has a passive effect on gameplay that maintains through all ages, and you are only slightly restricted in the combinations. I have heard many people say that the leader-civ combination breaks the immersion for them. While I understand that, I also don't. It doesn't seem to break immersion any more than America in 4000 BC. In fact, mixing leaders and civilizations isn't new to Civ. I remember a distinct complaint about Civilization 5 being that the feature was missing from Civ 4. When it comes to the civilizations, many have cited that switching civilization also takes them out of the immersion. I understand where they're coming from, but I feel that making every Civ unique to the age with buildings and units makes it a far better alternative. For example, in Civ 5, the Aztec unit is the Jaguar, which replaces the warrior with special buffs. The problem is, at high difficulties, your early game production would never be towards spamming military as the AI would have too many advantages to fight against you, and you would need to use the production to solidify your foundation. As a result, their bonus unit is worthless. If we compare that to the Ethiopian unit, which replaces the rifleman, their unique unit is far easier to make because it can more easily produce with a solid foundation. It is for these reasons that certain civilizations are favored over others in previous games. However, I don't particularly feel favored any civ in Civ 7 for any reason other than how my current game is going, or if they're related to my leader. This is incredibly freeing in that sense. To put it another way, I personally feel that the role-playing aspect is not as important as the boosts themselves. Additionally, this is arguably more true to what actually happens in history. There is no country that has existed since antiquity, much less a culture. For example, we are culturally very different than our parents. Next, let's briefly talk about the ages. In antiquity, you start on a continent and go out and explore to meet your fellow peoples. In exploration, you are encouraged to go and find other continents to obtain rare resources. I found that this actually made the naval aspect of the game fun, compared to previous iterations where I practically ignored it. In the modern era, you basically just rush for a victory. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of its implementation. It's important to also note that the modern age only goes to about the 1940s, unlike past Civ games, and it's heavily implied that future ages will be part of the expansions. This is okay because, pace-wise, the game is far better than previous installments. I can complete a Civ 5 game faster than a single age in 7, and victory isn't decided until the final age, which prevents long turns and hours of gameplay for a guaranteed win, which is common in 6. Each age is completed once you reach an age score, which is a unified reach to milestones and turns taken. This translates to 100 to 150 turns per age, though modern is significantly less if you rush for a victory. Overall, you end up with about 400 turns on standard. This is far better than the 260 turns it took me to beat Civ 5 in my Beating Deity series, and while you can do it in less, you don't need to. Another benefit from the age system is that you will roughly have the same units as other civilizations. No more will you be fighting their musketmen with your archers. Instead, the difference in unit strength no longer purely comes from technology, but also from resources and diplomacy. Theoretically, it's still possible to create units that have the same disparity as the archer and musketman from 5, but you have to intentionally try for it. In each age, you're encouraged to complete milestones that correspond to science, culture, economy, and military. Achieving these milestones will give bonuses to your leader when you go in the next age. Some people argue that these milestones effectively remove sandboxing as you have very specific tasks assigned to you. However, I personally disagree. You don't have to do any of them aside from finishing one in the modern age to win the game, and you can complete most of them even by ignoring them. The transfer between ages is ushered in by a crisis, a logical result explaining the ever-changing culture. The crises themselves are a little poorly implemented and feel more like a minor annoyance which you can turn off. Additionally, I don't believe them to be the only reason why your civ culturally changes, as implied by certain actions unlocking different civs through the ages. Another complaint is due to the changes between ages, but I personally don't feel it detracts from the game and instead adds a few more turns to move your units back to where you want. I won't be going into those in detail, but you should look them up if you're unaware about the changes that occur between the ages. Now, onto the 4 X's, especially how they relate to past installments. Exploration is amazing in Civ 7. Unlike previous entries where your only requirement for exploration is to settle cities in your immediate vicinity, find goodie huts, or meet other civilizations, Civ 7 makes it part of the core gameplay. In the Antiquity Age, it's pretty much the same. However, in exploration, it continues as you discover distant lands in order to secure resources via treasure ships. You don't have to do this and could decide to set up to steal from your neighbors as they try to bring theirs in, or you can ignore it as it only particularly deals with the economic milestones in the exploration age as well as gold increases. All in all, I feel exploration is actually rewarding compared to previous games. Expansion is also great in Civ 7. In 5, your happiness restricted you to a tall empire, typically 4 cities. In 6, a wide style was encouraged, which I felt could get out of hand time-wise. In 7, they introduced a soft settlement cap, which is both a hybrid of Civ 5 and 6. Going beyond reduces your global happiness, which slows down your celebrations, reducing your government's effectiveness as it is overburdened. This discourages going wide without blocking the possibility. I personally feel that this is a better system than previous games. As we're talking about expansion, it feels only right to talk about how cities are handled differently. Instead of becoming a normal city, a settler creates a town. A town has no production queue, but instead converts its production into 25% gold. Once a town grows, you can choose a specialization, which will prevent it from growing but send all food to your connected cities. For a sum of money, you can then convert the town to a normal city, and I believe the intention of this is to counter the district system, which will reduce the amount of food cities can get from tiles. Generally, a good rule is to have one town per city, so that cities continue to grow and add specialists in their districts. I personally love this change as it allows you to put down a town to grab resources you want, and eventually forget about it instead of having to manually control it for the rest of the game. Both exploration and expansion basically cover exploitation, as extremely relevant to both the antiquity and exploration ages, and I feel is a general improvement in this regard. Extermination is quite interesting. They've introduced army commanders with special abilities that now collect all the experience, which is great because now you no longer have to wonder which unit has all the bonuses. I also feel that the strategic possibilities of the commander presents an absolute improvements over previous installments, though they do need some polish. Additionally, there is a penalty if you start a war with someone who is not hostile to you. This works out great because it typically means the AI will denounce you before a war starts, giving you a heads up that they will be attacking. Funny enough, if you have enough of diplomatic influence saved up, you can actually reject their denouncement, effectively making it impossible to declare war without it being a surprise, forcing the penalty on them or preventing the war altogether. I will say I am extremely disappointed by how peace is handled. The only thing you can do for a peace agreement is demand or give up cities. This makes war practically pointless. If you like their cities, that's fine, but if you don't, you can raise them. This will cause a permanent penalty for combat during the rest of the age. If you don't care about that and want to wipe them out just because they're being aggressive or you like their territory, well, that adds a bunch of age progression, and now the age is over much faster than you anticipated. Basically, they seem to discourage war more so than previous civs. If I were to give this game a rating, I will be using the other gives as a yardstick. I've put almost 2,500 hours in Civilization 5, and I would say that on launch, it was a 6 out of 10 due to its relative simplicity. Once it was completed via expansions, it became an 8 out of 10. I've played Civilization 6 about 200 hours, and I would say it's a 7 out of 10. It has far more complexities than Civ 5 at launch, but it always felt like a modded and unbalanced and bloated Civ 5 to me. I felt I could overlook these issues due to the improvements they made with the district system, specifically harbors, but the wide playstyle its mechanics encouraged meant that it was a long time doing nothing, and ultimately discouraged me from finishing the game. Funny enough, this is one of the reasons why they made many decisions for 7, which I would say is a 6 out of 10. I would say that Civilization 7 is more complex than even the completed Civilization 5, and I feel that it specifically targets complaints that I have with previous iterations, while I believe the execution may be lacking. I approve of and enjoy these changes more so than the previous games. I feel that I'm not alone in this, as many content creators have also voiced similar opinions. I will say, however, that Civilization 7 seems to be geared more towards people who played previous iterations on higher difficulties and multiplayer, which may be the reason why content creators tend to give this positive reviews. Casual players are more likely to struggle accepting the new mechanics or just dislike them, as they may feel them to be limiting. Overall, the state of the game holds it back. Once it's been polished and has been fleshed out even further with expansions, I believe that this will be one of my favorite games in the series. To summarize, the past success of the series has caused expectations that many felt were not met. Assuming that liking past entries means that they will like this one, or that it will be like past entries. I feel the hate that Civ 7 is getting due to poor decision and execution made in the development process. Firaxis struggling between every platform or new gameplay hasn't made a product that feels like a complete game, more like an early access, which many find intolerable for the series given the release's circumstances. However, I feel the gameplay changes that they have made from previous iterations are designed specifically for players like me, and have made the game extremely enjoyable even for its faults. Currently, my biggest gripes with the game are the lack of information, the UI issues, the bugs, the game ending before the modern age, which brings back the rush to victory at high levels of Civ, which I do not like. Hopefully, they'll be able to fix and polish the crumbling Civilization 7. If you have any thoughts on Civ 7, whether agreeing or disagreeing, or something I didn't cover, please respectfully put your comments and opinions below. Thanks for watching, and God bless.